Chaim. So, last year on April 5th, 2022, Chad Kemple set the Guinness World Records. He ran a half marathon, and he did it in 2 hours and 19 minutes. 2 hours and 19 minutes. Anybody here has run a marathon before?
How long is it?
So for me, that would be a pretty big deal to run in 2 hours and 19 minutes. But amongst marathon runners, that's not that fast. The world record for half marathon was set a year earlier in 2021 by Jacob Limo, and the record is set at 57 minutes 31 seconds. So 2 hours and 19 minutes isn't that fast. So what was the world record? Why did the Guinness team come down to watch him finish the marathon? The answer is that he ran the marathon pushing a stroller with his 4-year-old quintuplets. You know what quintuplets are? What are quintuplets? 5 babies, 5 children who are born at once. So when running with 4-year-old quintuplets, that's 2 hours and 19 minutes is a pretty big record. And the truth is, each and every one of us, we're also running a marathon. Our life is a bit of a marathon where we have a big, long journey to travel on. And when our souls come up to heaven, there's going to be a whole group of angels standing there with cameras, taking pictures. They're going to say, "Wow, Yossi, you set a record." And you'll be like, "Me? What did I do? 2 hours, 19 minutes. How many mitzvahs did I do? I didn't do much." They're going to say, "Yeah, but you know how much baggage you were carrying? You know how many challenges you had in your life? You know the big stroller with the five quintuplets that you were pushing? Based on your challenges, you may have set a record." So in this week's Parsha, it starts off with Moshe Rabbeinu gives his last speech, where he gives a little bit of rebuke to the Jewish people. And it starts off, and it says, "These are the words that Moshe spoke to the children of Israel on the eastern side of the Jordan River. He spoke to them in the desert, in the plains, opposite the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and Teufel, and Lavan and Chatzeros and Dizah." And all these places seem a little bit strange, since they don't really seem close to anywhere near where Moshe was actually speaking to the Jewish people. And Rashi explains that these are places where the Jewish people sinned. And Moshe Rabbeinu was reminding the Jewish people and rebuking them for all the sins that they did. And some of these places are real places, some of them aren't even real places, but they're places that so to speak, represent sins that the Jewish people committed. So the obvious question is, if that's the case, if Moshe wants to rebuke them, why doesn't he come out and rebuke them? Why does he mention places where they sinned, and they're not even all real places? So the Medrash tells us the story of Eliyahu Hanavi. It's part of his book on Tanakh, but the Medrash gives more details. That we all know the famous story of Eliyahu Hanavi, how he brought down the fire on Mount Carmel, and all the Jewish people recognized that they have to serve Hashem, and they killed all of the prophets of the Baal. Now, Queen Izebel, after the story, was not very happy. All of her prophets had just been executed. So she ordered to have Eliyahu Hanavi captured, arrested, and executed. And Eliyahu Hanavi ran away. He ran away into the desert, and he went and he hid in a cave. And he was very upset. I just showed all the Jewish people, I just taught them, and I showed them that Hashem is the real God, and now I have to run away to hide in a cave of somewhere? The Jewish people still didn't learn their lesson. Nobody stood up for me. And at that moment, Hashem appeared to Eliyahu Hanavi. And he said, "Eliyahu, what are you doing here?" Now, of course, Hashem knew what Eliyahu Hanavi was doing here, but he wanted to give Eliyahu Hanavi a chance to explain the situation. And Eliyahu Hanavi says like this. He says, "Kanoi kinesi, I have been very zealous on Hashem's behalf, because the Jewish people, they have abandoned your covenant. They destroyed your altars. and they killed your prophets by the sword. I'm the only remaining prophet, and they want to kill me as well. So the Medrash says that Hashem turns to Eliyahu and he says, how can you speak this way about my people? Don't you know that when the Torah was given, myriads of angels came down to see the glory and the greatness of the Jewish people? Why do you speak about them this way? And then Hashem left. And he gave Eliyahu Hanavi 3 hours to think it over. He came back after 3 hours, and again, he asked Eliyahu Hanavi the same question, Eliyahu, what are you doing here? And Eliyahu Hanavi didn't change his tone one bit. He said, I have been very zealous on behalf of Hashem. Your people have abandoned your covenant. They destroyed your altars, and they've killed almost all of your prophets. And I'm the only remaining prophet, and they want to kill me as well. So Hashem turned to Eliyahu and he says, if that's the way you talk about my children, you could no longer be a prophet to the Jewish people. Even though Eliyahu Hanavi lives forever, but he was taken up to heaven. And you have to appoint Elisha, your student, in your place. And because you said that my children have abandoned my covenants, so I'm going to have you come down to every single Brit Milah, every single time the Jewish people uphold my covenant, and you will be able to see how the Jewish people are observing this covenant, are observing the bond, the connection that we made with Hashem, which is brought out in the Bris Milah. And Eliyahu Hanavi was not the only Jewish leader who was, so to speak, taken away when he spoke badly about the Jewish people. We know that the great Navi, Yeshayahu, saw Hashem. He saw a vision of Hashem sitting on his holy throne, surrounded by the angels. And he said, I'm not worthy of seeing this. I will surely die because I've seen such a holy vision. And I dwell amongst a nation of unclean lips, he said. That's how he referred to the Jewish people. And Hashem was not happy with this. The King Menashe, who was a wicked king, he served idols and he taught the Jewish people to serve idols. And of course Hashem sent Eliyahu Hanavi to rebuke Menashe, and Menashe was not happy that Eliyahu Hanavi was rebuking him, so he ordered Eliyahu Hanavi arrested. And then he brought Eliyahu Hanavi to court, and he said Eliyahu Hanavi needs to be executed. Why does he need to be not Eliyahu, sorry, Yeshayahu Hanavi needs to be executed. Why does Yeshayahu need to be executed? Not because I'm a tyrant who wants to execute somebody who I don't agree with, but because Yeshayahu went against the Torah. He went against the Torah. How did he go against the Torah? So first of all, the Torah says, Ki lo yira'ani ha'adam v'chai, that no one can see Hashem and live. And Yeshayahu, in his prophecy, he claims that he was able to see Hashem sitting on his throne. So he's going against the Torah. Right? Now, of course, the Gemara explains that there are different levels of seeing Hashem. There is the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was able to see Hashem, Baspaklaria Hameira, which means that with a clear lens, a clear vision. And then there are the other prophets who saw Hashem on a much lower level, Baspaklaria She'ena Meira. However, Yeshayahu knew that there's no point of answering Menashe. This is a kangaroo court. This is not a serious trial. And trying to defend himself is not going to work. Yeshayahu came along with his second argument against Yeshayahu. He said, you went against the Torah a second time. The Torah says that Hashem is close to the Jewish people, b'chol kareinu elav. Whenever the Jewish people want to call out to Hashem, Hashem is always ready to listen to us. But you, Yeshayahu, you said, Dirshu Hashem b'imatzai, kra'u b'yosei karev. They have to seek out Hashem at the certain times when He's close to us, which refers to the Aseres Yimei Tshuva, the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when Hashem is close to us. So how can you come along and say that we can only speak to Hashem at certain auspicious, special times, when the Torah says that you can always speak to Hashem? And of course, the Gemara answers that it depends whether you're davening with the minyan or a person's davening on his own. A person who's davening with the minyan is always able to access Hashem. Hashem always listens to our prayers when we daven with the minyan. But when a person davens on his own, so it's only if he's a great tzaddik, maybe Hashem will listen to him, or if he's davening at a special time, Hashem will listen to him. But otherwise, you have to. It's not. You can't be sure that Hashem will accept his prayers. And Menashe goes on with a few more claims against Yeshayahu Hanavi, and Yeshayahu realizes that there's no point of arguing back, and he's just quiet, and the court decrees that he should be executed. So Yeshayahu says one of the divine names of Hashem, and he was swallowed up in a nearby tree. There was a tree near where the court was, and he swallowed up in the tree. And most people who would see such open miracles would say, wow, okay, I'm not going to mess with this prophet. He says the name of Hashem and he's swallowed up by a tree. But the wicked Menashe, was not fazed by this. And he came along and he calls his servants. He says, I want you to bring axes and I want you to chop down that tree. So they bring axes. They start trying to chop down the tree. But it doesn't work. They're chopping, they're banging, and nothing works. And they're banging at the bottom of the tree near where Yeshayahu's legs are, and it doesn't work. They go up, they go near where his hands, his arms, and nothing works. Finally, they reach up where his mouth is. And at that moment, Hashem says, a mouth that spoke, as we mentioned before, that spoke against my children, I'm not going to protect. And at that moment, they chopped down the tree, and Yeshayahu was killed.
But he got the tshuva.
Of course, his death atoned for whatever minor mistakes he may have made, but the Medrash says that Hashem is a leader of the Jewish people, needs to be very careful. Right? Even though a leader's job is to rebuke the Jewish people when they do something wrong, but he has to be very careful with how he speaks about the Jewish people. Never to say anything bad about them. Rabbi Avahu and Reish Lakish were once traveling, and they came through the city of Kisrin. And Rabbi Avahu said, let's go around the city. I don't want to go into the city full of evil, wicked people. So Reish Lakish, who hears this, he gets off of his, he got off of his, I think they were on some sort of animal. I think he got off his donkey, and he bent down to the ground. He picked up sand, and he walked over to Rabbi Avahu, and he put sand into his mouth. What's this about? What's that for? And he says, you don't speak that way about the Jewish people. You don't speak that way about the Jewish people. Right? Even a Jew who sins, Hashem does not want us to speak that way about them. Even when a Jew is red with blood, red with sin, don't think that he's really red. He's like a person who has a sunburn, says Reish Lakish. He has to put some cream, some ointments on it, and within a short time it'll go away. It'll turn into a nice tan, a good-looking tan. Right? So this is really what the Medrash explains was going on with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu now has to rebuke the Jewish people. But he's a little bit nervous about it because he knows that the last time he spoke against the Jewish people, when he said, listen, you rebels, Shimon HaMoirim, what happened? He lost the ability to go into Eretz Yisrael. And now he has to rebuke them again. So therefore he decided he's going to be very careful. He's not going to mention the sins. He's not going to spell out the sins that the Jewish people did. He's going to start off by just mentioning the places where they sinned. To allude to the sins. Not to actually speak about the sins. I mean, later he goes on in a little more detail, but at least in the beginning he started off by just mentioning the places. Just alluding to the sins. But the question is, why did he choose, if you want to hint at the sin that somebody does, there are many ways to hint to something. Why did Moshe choose to speak about the places, the areas, the places where the Jewish people sin? And these aren't even real places, some of them. Some of them are just made up places. Right? So why does Moshe choose to mention places even though they're not real places? There are many ways he could have spoken about the sins of the Jewish people and hinted without actually spelling them out. So, the Rebbe Rashab was once traveling and he came to the city of Smargon. And he stopped at an inn near the city. It was middle of the summer, there was nice weather, and the Rebbe decided to stay there for a week. And when the people of the city found out that the Rebbe was going to be staying in their city for a while, they all wanted to come see the Rebbe and get blessings from the Rebbe and ask the Rebbe for advice. So they formed a line, they made a whole list of people who want to come see the Rebbe. A couple of days later, there were a large crowd of people gathered in the courtyard of the inn waiting to see the Rebbe Rashab. And suddenly, the Rebbe stopped the Yechidus, and he locked the door. He sent everybody out. He locked the door of his room. And the Chassidim thought maybe the Rebbe needs a little rest. He's seen so many Chassidim over the past couple of days. But after about half an hour, the Rebbe's secretary, Reb Zalman, came out of the Rebbe's room. And the people saw that his face was like red. It looked like he had been crying. And they told everybody to go to leave, to go home. A couple hours later, some elder Hasidim entered the house. They were standing near the Rebbe's room, and they heard the Rebbe crying inside. The Rebbe was praying with a lot of great devotion and tears. And they didn't really, Hasidim didn't understand what was going on. Hasidim also started to daven. They didn't really understand what's the cause of this. So the Hasidim broke up into groups, and they also started saying Tehillim. Later, the Rebbe, after they finished Tehillim, he came out from Mincha, and the Chassidim saw that he had a hard time walking. He had to rest a little bit on the way, and he davened Mincha the way you daven during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, during the high holidays. It's like a very, very special prayer.
Singing or
singing, a very serious with it, I guess the tune of I don't know if it's the same tune, but it was a great length and with a lot of kavanah. And the Rebbe came out and he delivered a mimer later, and he spoke about how a person's tears can cleanse his soul from any bad words or thoughts that he may have had. And then he spoke about the merit that comes from saying words of Torah and words of Tehillim. And the Chassidim remember that very special event. Nobody really knew what was going on, but they knew that something was happening. The next day, the Rebbe was still very weak. He stayed in his bed for a long period of time, but the day after that, he continued the Yechidus, and he didn't tell anybody in the beginning what happened. Rav Pinchas of Shklov, who had accompanied the Rebbe on the journey, so a few days later, he asked the Rebbe what happened. Right? He said, we know something happened. You didn't tell us. What was going on? So the Rebbe said like this: when a chassid comes into my room for Yechidus, he tells me a little bit about himself. And many people come and they tell me things that they did wrong. They want help with the sins that they had done, and they want to be able to do tshuva on those sins. And in order for me to help them, I have to relate to them. We discussed this in the last class. The Rebbe has to be able to relate to the chassid on his level. And therefore, I have to look within myself. And whatever sin the chassid tells me about, I have to try to find that within myself as well. I have to be able to connect with him. And only once I can actually relate to his experience, only then am I able to help him. Now, a few days ago, a person came into my room for Yechidus, and he told me this absolutely terrible, horrible thing that he had done. And I couldn't relate to it. I tried to think, is there any way I could connect to this person? How can I feel what he's feeling? How can I relate to his experience? And I couldn't. But I knew that if Hashem sent this person to me, there must be something within me, deep down within me, maybe something that happened many, many years ago that I don't even remember, which can be in a way similar and can help me relate to what this chassid was going through, to this sin that this chassid had committed. And that's why I stopped the Yechidus, and I started davening and asking Hashem to help me dig down within myself till I get to a point that I can actually relate to this chassid. And it took me a long time and a lot of effort, but that's what this was all about. There's another story told about this father, about the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash was once accepting Hasidim for Yechidus, and after about an hour of seeing many different Hasidim, all who had come to speak to the Rebbe about different things, the Rebbe called in his secretary, and he asked him to bring in a change of clothing. And the secretary took out the Rebbe's clothing, and saw that his clothing were drenched in sweat. And he says, he's walking out, and he looks at him, he's like, I don't understand. He wasn't running around, he wasn't running a marathon, right? He was sitting in his room. After an hour of sitting in your room and sweating like that, I don't understand what this is. So the Rebbe called in the secretary, and he told him, you can go home, I'll find a new secretary, but don't worry, we'll continue paying your salary. But if you don't understand what Yechidus is, I can't have you doing this job. And as for your question, how is it possible for somebody to sit in a room and sweat like this? He said, you don't understand. Every time a chassid comes into my room, I have to relate to this person, which means I have to, so to speak, spiritually undress myself, remove my own garments, and put on this person's garments. Right? And listen to what he has to say. But once I'm finished listening, I have to then go back to put on my own garments again in order to be able to help him. So I had, over the last hour, I had 20 people coming in. Wow. That means I had to change my spiritual garments 40 times. 40 times. Of course I'm sweating. And this is really the job of a leader who wants to be able to help somebody, who wants to be able to help somebody who made a mistake, who sinned. The first step is you have to be able to relate to that person, to understand where the person's coming from, what led the person to this situation. And only once he understands where he's coming from, he understands where the place that he's in, then he can rebuke him. Right, as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, "Al tadin es chavercha ashtagil l'kami." You cannot judge another person until you're in his place. In English, they say, "Till you walk a mile in his shoes." Right? That's the only way to really understand, and then you can judge and rebuke the person. And this is what's going on with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is about to rebuke the Jewish people, but he says, "Before I rebuke them, I first have to speak about where they were, where they're coming from. What were the circumstances that they were in?" Right? And therefore he mentioned the place that they sinned. Right? He started off, they were in the middle of the desert. Of course they're in the desert. They have these challenges. Right? The places that they were led to their sins. And in order for me to be able to rebuke them and help them fix up their sins, I have to first understand the circumstances that they were in, the places that they were in, and only then can I judge them, and only then can I help them. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu alluded to the sins of the Jewish people by mentioning the places that they were, the circumstances that they were in, which led to their sins, and that's why he was able to rebuke them, and he was able to help them fix it up. And to conclude with a story which took place when they were the Tzemach Tzedek, when there was a big fire in Lubavitch, and they had to rebuild the big shul, and they had a big ceremony for laying the foundation stone for the shul in Lubavitch. Right? So they had a big ceremony, a big celebration, and the Tzemach Tzedek turned to his Hasidim, and he said it's a very special time, and I was wondering if you would like me to say over Hasidic discourse, a Maimer Hasidus, or would you like me to tell over a story? Right? What would you guys say?
A story.
Story, of course.
What's the difference between a mimer and a story?
That's a good question. Really, a Maimer is also a story. But
that's why I want to know what's the difference.
So on the outside, a mimer is a deep Hasidic, a deep discussion about some deep concept about godliness, about the spiritual realms, It starts off with a question, and it goes through explaining some deep concept. And the story also has that, but a bit more hidden. It's not as revealed in the story. So the Chassidim all said, "We want to hear a story." So he says, "Okay, I'll tell you a story." There was once a Jewish innkeeper. And the Jewish innkeeper, he leased an inn from the local duke, from the local pirates. But this duke had a manager, an estate manager, who was also a Jew. And he managed all of the duke's properties. So this innkeeper rented the inn from this estate manager, from this Jew. His name was Yaakov. And Yaakov managed it on behalf of the duke. And this innkeeper, he had he was struggling to make ends meet, and he didn't have money to pay the rent. And a month went by, 2 months went by, and he kept on pushing it off. I'll pay next month. I'll pay next month. Finally, at the end of the year, he gets a visit from Yaakov, the manager of the duke, who says, if you don't pay your rent, we'll have to evict you. So he said, "How can you do that? I'm going to be out in the street with my family." He says, "Listen, if you want, I can extend it another month. Fine, we'll do it." He waited another month. He still couldn't pay the rent. He said, "Listen, I have to send you out." So the innkeeper was desperate. He doesn't want to get kicked out of his family, sleep in the streets, be homeless. So he runs to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, and he says, "Rebbe, you have to help me. Yaakov, the duke's manager, wants to kick me out of my inn." So the Rebbe sends a message to Yaakov that he wants to speak to him. Yaakov comes to speak to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says to Yaakov, "How can you do such a thing? How can you kick a Jewish family out into the street?" And he says, "Listen, it's been a year, they haven't paid their rent." And the Rebbe says, "Okay, I understand, but you can't. This is a terrible thing to do. He's struggling. He tries to pay the rent. He couldn't make it. Okay, it happens." So Yaakov says, "Okay, you know what, Rebbe? You're right. I shouldn't really be kicking him out. I'm willing to forgive the entire debt that he owes, but next year, but starting from this month, he has to pay every month in time." Okay, sure, the innkeeper agrees. From now on, he's going to pay every month in time. His outstanding debt is all forgiven. And a month goes by, and again, he doesn't have money. I'll pay next month. Fine. Another year goes by, and at the end of the year, the Yaakov comes back to the innkeeper, and he's like, "That's it. We made a deal with the Rebbe. You have to pay your rent, and I have to send you out." So again, he runs off to his Rebbe. And the Rebbe again calls Rabbi Yaakov, and he says, "Yaakov, you can't do this. A poor Jew, his family, you can't just kick them out into the street. It's cold. It's the middle of the winter. Whatever." And Yaakov says, "Rebbe, I forgave his whole debt. I just asked him to start paying in time." So Rebbe says, "You got to give him another chance." "Okay, fine. Another chance. I'm willing to forgive the outstanding debt, but from now on, he's got to pay it down again. We're not going to keep on doing this." "Okay, of course," the innkeeper says, "for sure. This year, starting this month, I'm going to pay every month in time." Okay? A month goes by, and again he doesn't have the money, and another month goes by, and another month. Finally, at the end of the year, Yaakov comes back, and he says, "That's it, you're out." So the innkeeper runs back to his Rebbe again, right? And the Ruzhiner calls Yaakov, and he says, "How can you do such a thing?" And Yaakov says, "Listen, Rebbe, that's it. It's 3 years already, right? You told me once, I agreed, I forgave the debt. The second year again, I did it. But Rebbe, it's not your money, it's my money. You can't tell me what to do with my money." And he walks out, and he evicts the innkeeper. Okay? Many years go by, and Rabbi Yaakov gets old, and after 120 years, his neshama leaves this world, and it comes up to heaven. Goes up to heaven, and he comes before the heavenly court, and they bring out all of the mitzvahs that he did, all the averos that he did. They start putting it on the scale, and then an angel dressed in black comes out, and he stands in front of the court, and he says, "Do you know what this Yaakov did? He took a Jewish family, a husband, a wife, 8 children, and he threw them into the street in the middle of the winter."
Black is not a good sign.
There's nothing to talk about. He's guilty. He has to, terrible punishments. And the angels hear this. They say, really? He evicted a Jewish family? Sent them out into the street in the middle of the winter? That's it. He's guilty. Absolutely. No matter how many mitzvahs he did, nothing can atone for that. Absolutely guilty. Yaakov says, I'd like to appeal the verdict. On what basis? He turns to the angels and he says, you angels have never done any business in your life. You've never dealt with money. You don't know what it's like to live in a physical world, to try to manage real estate, to try to run a business. And do you know how much 2 years, I was willing to forgive his debt for 2 years. After 3 years, I had to evict him. I had no choice. How can you blame me for that? And I don't think you angels are fit to judge me. I would like to get new judges. Judges who can understand what I'm going through. Okay? It's a good argument. So they brought out the souls, the neshamas of the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch. They brought out a few other rabbis. I think the Bach was one of them. Circus. And they brought, the neshamas of big Torah scholars who had lived many years earlier, and they established a new court. And they listened to the case again. And again, the angel dressed in black comes out and he tells over the whole terrible story, how a whole Jewish family were evicted and were left homeless. And the neshamas of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Bach, and whoever else was there, they said, such a terrible sin, he is guilty. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And Rabbi Yaakov says, I'm sorry, I'd like to appeal the verdict the second time. On what basis? He says, the Beis Yosef has been in heaven for the last 200 years. He's forgotten what it's like to live in the physical world. He's forgotten what it's like to struggle with parnasa. I would like a judge who understands, who is right now alive and understands what I went through. And the heavenly court said, that's a good argument, and that's what we're going to do. And the Tzemach Tzedek finished off the story. And he said, so now we turn to all of you who are gathered here for this ceremony of laying the foundation stone of the new shul in Lubavitch. I turn to all of you and I ask you, what do you think about Rabbi Yaakov? And the Chassidim were a little scared to say anything. So the Baal Shem Tov said, I think that he is innocent. And all the Chassidim said together, innocent, innocent, innocent. Of course, that was the ruling in heaven as well. So when it comes to judging somebody, right, it's very easy for an angel who has never experienced what the person has gone through to judge him. Even a neshama of a tzaddik who's been in heaven for the last 200 years, he's not fit to judge you. In order to judge somebody, you have to be in their shoes. You have to stand in their place. You have to know what they're experiencing. And the judgment is completely different, right? As we said, and as we said in the beginning, someone who's running a marathon, pushing a stroller with quintuplets, his Guinness record is going to be very different from someone who runs on his own, right? Someone who is running with pushing big bags, who has a lot of baggage, who's going through difficult circumstances, he's judged completely differently. And we're taught that when we want to judge others, we have to try to understand what they're going through. And if we do that, so the heavenly court will look at us the same way. And when they judge us, they'll judge us based on our circumstances and judge us based on our struggles that we're going through. And even if it takes us 2 hours and 19 minutes to finish the marathon, we might set the world record. Chaim.